With me in the blue corner is Ed Selley, and in the red corner is Simon Lucas. Now, Ed is going to be putting up the fight for the Px7s, which I suppose in this case you could call the base model, although I think the base for Bowers and Wilkins is pretty high. And Simon is going to be giving a shout out to the Px8s. So thank you both for joining me. I think, firstly, we're going to hand over to Ed and say, right, why would you be happy to stick with the Px7s?
The first reason is that the Px7S2 is extremely good. I've spent time with both headphones, and I'm writing this. I'm saying this from having the perspective of having written the Px8 review for Sound Advice. It's not that I don't think that the Px8 doesn't have any virtues over the Px7S2, but it does come down to those price differences that you mentioned just now. I think that they are relatively high, and the brute point is that Bowers and Wilkins really did pull out the stops for the S2. I was really genuinely impressed at how much of a step forward it was over the original Px7. And something else that I think is going to sort of play heavily into the considerations here, and I do say this as someone who is not an iPhone user, but I do use iPads on a regular basis with the same Bluetooth fitment. One of the things that has to be taken into account right from the start, and I did say this in the Px8 copy, is if you are an iPhone user, they are tremendous devices, but in Bluetooth terms, they're not the most sophisticated objects on the market. I would say especially if you are part of the Apple ecosystem, the limiter is going to be the performance of that Apple device. And some of the bells and whistles of the Px8 simply aren't going to make themselves felt when you use the more sophisticated headphone with them. Under those circumstances, in particular, the Px7S2 is exceptionally good, and the Px8 is not going to demonstrate the clear air that I think it can do potentially under some other circumstances. Being generous for a moment.
Okay, so we've heard the shout for the Px7s. I want a good clean fight, gents, please. Simon, why would you say the Px8s are worth the more than £200 extra?
Well, they are like the Px7S2, but more so, basically. I think Ed's point that if you're an iPhone user, that the Px8 are kind of hamstrung by that is true. But equally, I'm not sure if any of us would recommend spending £600 on a pair of headphones in order to drive them with a smartphone. But but nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. The Bowers and Wilkins has taken what is a very successful design with the Px7S2 and in tremendous good taste has tarted it up somewhat. See my diamond cut ear plates here. See how they catch the light. Smell my Napa leather. Well, with him, smell my Napa leather up to a point. The arms now are cast aluminium, which is an improvement on the fairly ordinary looking composite that the Px7S2 use. And then on the inside, there's a new 40mm carbon dome driver, which is based on Bowers and Wilkins' very successful carbon dome tweeter, which it's deployed in its new 700 series, which one of us will be reviewing for Sound Advice soon, I'm sure. They perform brilliantly. They are an incremental improvement on Px7S2, certainly, but they're an improvement nevertheless. And then an improvement in aesthetic terms as well, even though if you saw them side by side, they're very similar looking until you start to examine them. £600 is not an inconsiderable sum of money for headphones, and I say that as someone who routinely deals with headphones that are much more expensive than that. But I think, and you have to kind of make the point here for yourself, 380 quid on a pair of Px7S2s is money well spent. But if you can justify to yourself £600 for some headphones and you're not going to be driving them using an iOS smartphone, then yeah, they make perfect sense. They're as good as anything you'll hear for this sort of money.
And I have to admit, I cannot smell your Napa leather from here. I think I'm quite glad about that, Simon, to be honest.
You say
But we
that.
trust you. We trust you. And they do look very nice. And I have to say, you're coming across loud and clear on the show. And I hope you're enjoying us in lush audio in both of your ears in the PX8.
Well, indeed I am. I can't help but notice that Ed's not wearing his PX7 S2s. I'm not sure what kind of advocate that makes you.
I gave the samples back to Bowes and Wilkins because it's also worth pointing out that
I never give
in terms of
never.
In terms of being a keen recycler, something else that may or may not swing people's decisions on this is I do agree that the material quality of the PX8 is better. I do think, however, that Bowes and Wilkins has missed a trick insofar as there is no animal-free option on the Px8, where the Px7 S2 is entirely animal-free. I think it would have been a neat option if they'd also had one animal-free variant of the Px8 as well. But the Px7 S2 is, of course, entirely animal-free.
So Px7 for the vegan-friendly option. Now, I said in the beginning that they are both wireless headphones, as we can clearly see, with Simon modelling the Px8s, and that they're also both noise-cancelling. The noise-cancelling, does it work exactly the same on both models? And does that affect the enjoyment of the music at all? Does it work really well with music, or is it just for use on aircraft and things like that?
Oh, it's the same system. It's my understanding that Px7 S2 and the Px8 use exactly the same algorithms for noise cancelling, and it's very effective. Some noise cancelling systems can affect the sound of the headphones, and it's a noticeable difference in the way they perform when you switch it on and then you switch it off, but that's not the case with these, and it's very effective as far as noise cancelling goes as well. It is only on or off, and for this sort of money it's possible you might expect a degree within the app to sort of trim the amount of noise cancelling you're getting so that you're not in danger of being hit by a bus or anything, but once it's on, it works really well, and it doesn't make a difference to the sound of either pair of headphones, which are very competitive.
That's good to hear, that it doesn't introduce any artifacts into the sound by using the noise cancelling, which is excellent. Ed, how do they integrate with the B&W Music app? Does that all work smoothly?
Extremely well. Yes, it is pretty smooth. The caveat to the Bowes Music app is that if you just own a pair of Bowes headphones, it feels massively over the top. The whole purpose of the music app is to tie together a family of Bowes and Wilkins products. So unlike almost any other wireless headphone on the market, you have to set up a user ID and have a password and other gubbins just to actually make EQ adjustment and noise cancelling adjustments on your Px7 S2 or Px8. But the whole idea is that in the fullness of time, you can stroll to the front door of your house and the music will disconnect from your headphones and start playing on your other Bowes and Wilkins device. Whether it actually ever works as slick as that will be something that we can watch from a safe distance. But they have taken the very, very bold move, because it's not a small thing to do. You can now access streaming services within the app. Within the Bowes app, rather than going to the streaming service app and making a connection through the standard Bluetooth settings on your phone. When it works, and it does work most of the time, it does feel slick. It feels cohesive. It feels that the time and effort has gone into it. But there's no getting around the fact that if you've just bought one pair of headphones, when you compare it to what Philips is doing, what Sennheiser is doing, what Mark Levinson is doing at an even higher price point than the Px8, it just feels a little bit more intrusive by necessity of it potentially being able to control more than just the headphones. But it does work well in itself once it is set up.
Excellent, and that applies equally to the Px7 and Px8, I assume.
Yes, absolutely.
But just coming back to the aesthetics, one more, because we are nearly out of time on this. You haven't come to blows over the Px7 and Px8 yet. You've put forth a very gentlemanly argument, if I may say so. But Simon, another £100 for the 007 limited edition Midnight Blue. Really? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to reserve judgment on this because I haven't seen them. I've seen the pictures. Obviously, they've got a little red button. That's always exciting, right? And they're blue, which would, I don't know, match my overcoat. But I mean, a limited edition is always a bit of a. It depends, really. If it's just aesthetic, then I can't imagine that they can possibly be worth the extra money. But then I'll see a pair, and then maybe I'll be swept off my feet by how blue they are and how red their button is. But it's a bit like buying LPs and paying extra because this one is on white vinyl instead of black. Do you know what I mean? One presumes these are the same headphones that have been mildly tarted up.
And yet we know a lot of people who would pay more for an album on white vinyl instead of black, and it becomes a collector's item, right?
In theory, I suppose, yeah. I mean, people collect headphones, I realise that. But me personally, I struggle with it. No, if I spend less money on the black LP, that means I've got more money left to buy more black LPs, doesn't it?
And
I'm
Ed,
afraid there's not going to be any disagreement from me. No. Every once in a great while, I mean, I have, as it's sort of known in others, I have something of a trainer fixation, and I have been known to spend curious sums of money on very specific colourways. But then equally, there are a committed group of lunatics who will pay me handsomely to then take those off my hands later on. So it's not that thing. In the case of electronics, paying more for a colour variation, especially when it's a deviation from what is actually a very nice set of colours available from the base model anyway. I say base model, the standard Px8. And also, I'm not that much of a fan of Bond, although I know that Mr. Withers will appear on this podcast a little bit later on, and he would buy 007 themed underpants, so he might be the person that you need to bring that up with later on. So, it must be said that there is a Bond cachet that some people will go for in a big way. I don't think that Bose is going to struggle to sell these. I need to be clear on that.
Then I shall ask Mr. Withers later on, because he's here with some reviews as well. But in the meantime, thank you both very much for your reviews on the Px7 and Px8 Bose and Wilkins headphones. But Ed, don't run off, because I need you to come back in just one moment and talk to us about getting streaming right without overcomplicating things.